Hello, everyone. We're so happy you could join us this evening. I hope you'll find the information that my colleague, Chrissandra Andrae, has curated for us to be as helpful as I believe it will be. I'm not going to speak for very long. I just want to let you know that the chat function will only be available to ask questions of the panelists, which include myself and Avital Isaacs, one of the therapists we work with at Manhattan Alternative Wellness Collective. Chrissandra will be the only person presenting information and will not be answering any questions while presenting. So our role as panelists will be to answer whatever questions we can. If we can't answer them, we'll let you know and we'll try to get you the information at the end of the webinar or sometime after. If you happen to forget and direct a question to Chrissandra and your question doesn't get answered right away, please don't be concerned. Just redirect it to Avital or me. At the end, we'll open up the chat to everyone for a few minutes. Please remember to change your name if you'd like to be anonymous, which you can do by clicking on participants on the bottom of the screen, then hovering over your name in the list to the right, clicking on more, and clicking rename. Avital and I will be turning off our cameras now, but we'll still be here. And without any further ado, I'll hand the mic over to Chrissandra so we can move right into the content.
Thank you, Dulcinea. Thank you, Avital.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am very grateful that you're here with me tonight. And before we begin, I want to suggest that you might have a pen or paper handy to take any notes you like. No worries if you just want to watch or if you don't have pen or paper handy. And I have put my phone on airplane mode. I know that I might be getting texts about what's going on in the world tonight, or even tempted to refresh the updates page that's pulled up on my Safari. And I would like this to be an opportunity for us to really be present in what's going on right now in this moment, present with the information that we're going to go over, the skills we're going to practice together, and also what's going on in the body, in the mind. So I want to talk about what we're going to review first, and then we'll dive right into the content. So I have 5 points on my agenda for tonight. I want to first define a crisis, and then talk about safety planning. So that might be a really helpful time to have the pen and the paper. So you might create your own safety plan with me tonight. And then we'll talk about some distress tolerance skills. So there will be some didactics. We're going to talk about wise mind accepts, distraction. We're going to talk about the tip skill, how to physiologically move the body out of mobilization. And we're going to talk about self-soothing. And we'll close out skills practice with a full body scan meditation. And finally, when we're done, as Dulcinea mentioned, there's going to be a resource page cast on the screen, and Dulcinea and Avital are going to be ready and available to speak with folks about resources or talk about even crisis urges that are emerging right now. So without any further ado, I'm going to dive right in. So what is a crisis? So most of this information is coming from the 2nd edition of Marsha Linehan's DBT Skills and Training Manual from 2015. And she explains that a crisis can be defined as a highly stressful situation with potential for very negative outcomes. Okay. They're short term. So you may be able to get through a period of urges if you distract yourself, but if every time a difficult to solve problem comes along, you avoid it or distract from it, problems will remain unsolved. Things are unlikely to improve. So crises also create intense pressure for a quick resolution. So we might be experiencing any of those 3 criteria right now for a crisis. So there are 2 broad categories for a crisis. First is you have a strong desire to engage in a destructive behavior, such as to take drugs, die by suicide, quit a job, etc. And acting on those urges can be ineffective. You are facing, in the second type of crisis, a major demand that will have serious consequences if it goes unmet, such as writing a report before a deadline, submitting your taxes on time, or paying bills or credit card debt. So you can feel completely overwhelmed and unable to focus and get things done. Shutting down and avoiding such demands also is ineffective, like acting on crisis urges. So something I want to add to this is suicidal ideation can be conceptualized as a narrowing of thought to the point that we actually think that death is going to solve all of our problems. And when those thoughts become overwhelming, we can engage in a safety plan until we can actually work on our problems. So I might be getting ahead of myself by mentioning a safety plan, but I want to talk about how we might actually quantify thinking about a crisis. How might we check in with ourselves and say, okay, this is a crisis moment. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone. Okay, here's a little image I've created. On the y-axis here, I've got something called SUDS. SUDS stand for subjective units of distress. The S pluralizes SUDS. So SUDS range from 0 to 10, 0 to 100, which just would add a 0 to everything here. And on the x-axis, we have time. Okay, so we might be moving along with a certain level of distress. And if you're following my cursor, you might see that our SUDS are maybe at 60 here. And something potentially might prompt a crisis urge or create a demand for immediate resolution. And we're thrown into the crisis range of SUDS. What is that crisis range? Some would say it's between 70 and 100%. If we check in with ourselves and we ask where our level of distress is, if the answer is between 70 and 100 out of 100, it might be a time to engage in crisis survival skills. And hopefully what we can see is that crisis survival skills are going to have us, first and foremost, survive the crisis. And second, maybe even bring those distress levels down. Okay. So let's talk about safety planning, because that's the next place to go with this. So as I mentioned, this might be the time to pull out your pen and paper and follow along with me and create a safety plan, because this could be helpful for when you are at 70 to 100. I hope it's not soon though. Okay. So I've got it broken down into 6 steps here, and we'll move through each of these, and maybe I'll give some suggestions along the way. So step 1 to the safety plan is warning signs. How are you going to know to implement a safety plan? So a warning sign might be a thought, a certain type of thought, like, I can't take it anymore. It could be a certain emotion, like sadness at intensity 5 out of 5, or fear intensity 5 out of 5. It could be a physiological sign, or a combination of them, like heart's racing, sweat is pouring down the arms, tears are streaming down the face, things like that. We might say, I notice my SUDS are between 70 and 100. And that's a warning sign to implement a safety plan. So this specifically addresses, how do you know that you are in a crisis? How do you know to implement skills to move through a crisis, not to make the situation worse? Okay, so step 2 then, we know we've got to use the plan. Where do we begin? Internal coping strategies. What are the things that I can do to take my mind off of my problems without contacting another person? Okay, so you might write this one down and you might have some things in mind. There are some people who find certain types of YouTube videos soothing. There are people who find certain pieces of literature or art, certain sounds to be really helpful. And these are coping strategies that we can do on our own. Self-regulation. Step 3 is places and social settings. Where can I go that's safe? Where can I go that's distracting from high intensity urges? Now, during the pandemic, this has become a more challenging step. And yet I've seen some really exciting answers from people who are developing safety plans from me. We might go to a park. We might go to a cemetery. There are possible locations that are low risk that are outside of the place that you're experiencing your crisis urge. Maybe this is even the lobby of your building or right on the stoop. Step 4 is distracting people. Who can I contact to distract me from high intensity urges? This is about people who are distracting, folks who you can talk about something totally different from what you're experiencing. Someone who can maybe make you laugh or who will tell you about all their problems. It's not about someone who you can confide what's going on with you. That's the next step. So here it's really important to include numbers. Now we've got phones that automatically save numbers, so it might not be that relevant. And even still, when we're in a crisis, our minds are not processing information very well. We are experiencing cognitive dysregulation. So we might want to include phone numbers just in case. Step 5 here is friends and family I can ask for help. So you might ask the question, okay, who can I contact for help? Who can I tell about what's going on in this moment? It's a bit different than people who can distract me. This is someone who I can be vulnerable with, someone safe. Include phone numbers as well for the same reason I mentioned before. Now, step 6 here is thinking about providers. Which providers can I call in a crisis? So include phone numbers as before and hours of availability if the provider doesn't take crisis calls 24/7. So if you are someone who works with me, I do take crisis calls 24/7, which is very advantageous, so you don't have to put my hours down. However, if your therapist only takes calls during certain work hours, it'll be really important, or anyone else, a certain doctor you see. It'll be important to have that information on hand to know when you can next reach out to them. 911 is also a number you can call. We're going to close out today talking about different resources. Those resources can be used for step 6. Lifelines. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll move on. I hope you all got the notes you needed from this, and if we need to come back to it at the end, I'm happy to share it with you once more. You can also email me and I'll send you bits of this document as well. So now we're going to move on to thinking about skills, okay? How do we know when distress tolerance skills are working for a crisis? Okay, when time passes and you haven't made anything, or you haven't done anything rather, to make the situation worse, distress tolerance skills are working. If you haven't made the situation worse, the skills are working. SUDS going down might also indicate that the skills are working. When you start feeling able to tolerate the problem while using these skills, they might be working. Remember, the first most important part is that we're not making the situation worse. Finally, crisis survival skills might help you feel better. If so, that's really great. If not, keep focusing on surviving the crisis. Surviving the crisis means not making the situation worse. That's our main objective with the crisis. Survival, not making it worse. So we're going to move on to the first skill. I'm going to talk about all the pieces of it. There are 7 of them. And then I'm going to cast what it is that we've talked about, a little bit of a summary image. So this one's called accepts. Wise mind accepts. We can remember it with an acronym. So when you're in a crisis, distraction can help you avoid dangerous behaviors. But distracting can easily be overused. So don't use it as a routine method to avoid painful emotions. Remember, 70 to 100. So here are some effective uses of distraction. When emotional pain threatens to become overwhelming, and it's more effective to distract than feel your emotions fully, that's one way. Another way, when problems cannot be solved immediately. So sometimes the sense of urgency we might be experiencing can make it very difficult to focus on anything else except for the crisis. I absolutely get it. I've been there. Now, this is a time to try distraction. To remember this skill, as I mentioned, we think wise mind accepts. Accepts is the key word here. ACCEPTS. It's an acronym. So what's the A for? Activities. Engaging in activities that are neutral or opposite the negative emotions and crisis behaviors can work to reduce impulsive urges and distress in a number of ways. They distract attention and fill the short-term memory with non-crisis oriented thoughts, images, and sensations. They affect physiological responses and emotional expressing as well. They can reduce the emotional pain that often drives a crisis behavior. So activities, there are a variety of them. Going out to walk the dog, surfing, playing video games, putting on a movie, tracing our hand, looking at all of the different things in the room, all kinds of different activities, whatever works for you. So the first C we're going to talk about is contributing. Contributing to someone else's well-being reinforces attention, refocuses attention from oneself to others and what one can do for them. So participating fully in the experience of helping someone can make people completely forget their own problems. For some individuals, contributing also increases a sense of meaning in life, and that improves the moment. Now, the second C is comparisons. So making comparisons also refocuses attention from oneself to others, but in a different way than contributing. In the case of comparisons, the situation of others, so those coping in the same way or less well, those in less fortunate situations in general, well, those are used to recast one's own situation in a more positive light. Alternatively, one can focus on past problems that are no longer occurring and compare the present moment with a past difficult time. Okay, so we've got activities, contributing, comparisons. Now we're going to talk about emotions. Generating different emotions distracts from the current situation and the negative emotions you might be experiencing. So this strategy interferes with the current mood state. And this technique requires first figuring out the current emotion so that activities for generating a different one can be sought. So this might be that time where you check in, count your suds. Okay, what am I experiencing? What's going on in the moment right now? What are the emotions that I'm feeling? So how can we practice this skill? What might it look like? Read an emotional book, such as a thriller. After you put the book down, think back on the story in the book and experience the emotion of the character, not whatever emotion your crisis urge would have you feel. Don't read something, however, that's going to make you feel worse than you already feel, or you're going to cue the crisis behavior. You're going to reinforce and get the distress emotion, whatever that might be, refiring inside of you. So we want to think about different emotions from the current situation. Okay. P is pushing away. Pushing away from a painful situation can be done by leaving it physically or blocking it out of one's mind. So leaving the situation decreases contact with its emotional cues. Blocking is a somewhat conscious effort to inhibit thoughts, images, and urges associated with negative emotions. One form of blocking is to repeatedly put off destructive behaviors for a brief period of time. Blocking is a bit like riding a bicycle, okay? Some people don't get it when they first hear about it. You really understand it when you do it. It's perhaps related actually to the ability to dissociate or depersonalize, which is why it should not be the first technique tried, but it can be really useful in an emergency. And that's also the function of dissociation that dates hundreds of millions of years back to our common ancestors. Survival, self-protection. So the secret to pushing away as a form of distraction is not to overuse it. It's not the first one we try. We might try an activity. We might try contributing. And if that doesn't really work, okay, we might go to pushing away. Again, it's a conscious effort. We choose to kind of dissociate in that moment. It's not something that happens to us. It's not passive. It's a really big distinction from some of the types of dissociation that we might target as a problem behavior and a more adaptive version of it. Okay, so what does this skill look like? How do I do this? How do I push away? Okay, build an imaginary wall between yourself and other people. Put off smoking a cigarette for 5 minutes, every 5 minutes. Okay, just 5 more minutes. And then when we get to that 5 minutes, it's only 5 more minutes after that. We're not looking at this whole expanse of the future. We're looking at a really short chunk of time. Okay, you can also put your emotions in a box and put the box on a shelf. Now, this can be done through visualization. I have a shelf in my closet that I use to put some emotions that I don't want to have in the moment. And sometimes I dust it off and pull the box out. I have to look at those emotions. You can actually make a worry box too and drop pieces of paper into it with labels of the stressors. It's a way to kind of physicalize the process. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm pushing it away. It's in the worry box. I'm going to worry about it when I pull it out of the worry box. Okay, 2 more here. Thoughts. Distracting with thoughts fills the short-term memory so that thoughts activated by the negative emotion don't continue to reactivate the emotion. It's common among a lot of these skills. We're filling the short-term memory with things opposite the target or neutral to it. And the target is the crisis. So what might you do? Sing a song in your head. Count all the ceiling tiles, one by one. People count sheep sometimes too. I have a particularly fun game that I like to play when I'm in the subway, a thought game. It's called the O game, and I can play it really anywhere, but the subway is where it comes up for me the most. And I look all around for the letter O in different objects, like the ring holding the purse to the purse strap. That's an O, so I check that off. The letter O on a Subway ad, that counts, of course, so I check that off. That can be distracting from whatever thoughts are prompting the crisis. Finally, sensations. Intense, different situations can focus attention on something other than emotional distress, its source, or the crisis urges related to it. So, a really popular one is holding an ice cube in your hand. You observe the sensations. Focus even on the ice cube getting smaller and smaller and smaller in your hand. And when your thoughts try to take you elsewhere, go back to the physical sensation. Now, other ideas for eliciting sensations are tasting Tabasco sauce, lemon wedges, intensely sour candy, putting on headphones and listening to fast, upbeat music. I always say that my version of the sensation skill is to blast Rob Zombie and fill my mouth full of Sour Patch Kids. That's pretty distracting for me. I'm usually not thinking about the thing that's prompting my crisis when that happens. Okay, so let's take a look. Summary here. That's a whole lot. And here we have it laid out. Activities, drawing, going for a walk, dancing, yoga. There's so much we can do with activities. Contributing, being there for others, going to help someone, being of service. Comparisons is thinking about someone who's not coping as well as you are in the same situation, thinking about someone who's in a worse off situation in general, reframing the moment. I am not in the worst possible situation on this planet. Or thinking about yourself in a past situation where you actually weren't coping as well as you're coping right now. Emotions, this is like turning on the soap opera and having really intense emotions come at you, maybe opposite or neutral, reading the thriller that's different from your crisis urge prompt and experiencing what the characters are going through. Then there's pushing away, which is conscious dissociation. It sounds paradoxical. It's not that, it's that we choose to dissociate. It's not that the dissociation happens to us automatically. We can build a wall between ourselves. We can put our problems in the closet. Finally, thoughts, like the O game I mentioned. O's, you might see me pick up my cup and you might find some O's in there. And sensations, finally. Intense sensations. Tastes, sounds, even really bright paintings, psychedelic artwork, blacklight art, overwhelming. So this is how we can remember it. Wise mind accepts. Okay, so that's the skill of distraction. So if any of that resonated with you, you can put that on your safety plan for coping strategies you can do on your own, okay? I've got some more stuff that you can put on that as well, and we're gonna go through some more. So the next thing I'm gonna talk about is tip skills. And just like I did with accepts, I'm gonna talk about it first, and then I'm gonna show you a little visual so that we can remember what the acronym TIP stands for, okay? So what are the tip skills? There are 4 of them. TIPP, tipping the temperature of your face with cold water, intense aerobic exercise, paced breathing, and paired muscle relaxation. Okay, why do we use tip skills? Of course, crisis survival. Let's get a little more into detail though. I like the details. To change your body chemistry to reduce high emotional arousal and feelings of being overwhelmed. It works very fast within seconds to minutes to bring down your emotional arousal. To me, tip skills are the gold standard for crisis survival. It really tricks the body into regulating. I generally say start here if your SUDS are at 100. They're as effective as dysfunctional behaviors like drinking, using drugs, eating, or self-harming. at reducing your painful emotions, but without the short and long-term negative consequences. They work like fast-acting medication too, and they don't have the cost of medication attached to them or even the side effects that some medications have. They're easy to use. They don't require a lot of thinking, especially if you practice them. That's the key to all of these skills. Practice makes perfect. And they can be used in public, some of them at the very least, without others knowing that you're using skills, that you're in a crisis. So let's talk about, how does tip work? So the first one, as I mentioned, is tipping the temperature of your face with cold water. So some background is that this skill induces the mammalian dive reflex. It's a response that mammals have, which sets off the parasympathetic nervous system and reduces physiological and emotional arousal. So the dive reflex is the tendency in humans, we'll talk about now, for the heart to slow down below resting heart rate when the person is immersed in very cold water without oxygen. This effect is due to increased activation, as I mentioned, of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the body's physiological system for decreasing arousal. So this is the system that's at play when we're really chill with friends and having a great time hanging out, feeling socially safe and connected, and also when we're dissociated. That's all happening with the parasympathetic nervous system. So states of emotional arousal occur when the sympathetic nervous system, now that's fight or flight, becomes overactive and the parasympathetic nervous system is underactive. So the tip skill is going to say, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system body. Let's go. So how do we do it? You use a bowl of cold water, bend over, hold your breath, put your face up to your temples. Specifically, we want to get this area around the eye sockets submerged in water. This is the part of our human evolution where the mammalian dive reflex is most sensitive, or is, period. Now, this is usually sufficient to induce the dive reflex. The colder the water, the longer the immersion, the better it works, okay? Don't have the water too cold. Water below 50 degrees Fahrenheit might cause facial pain. Now, an alternative to that, if you don't have a bowl of cold water, is to use an ice pack, a Ziploc bag full of ice, or a cold, wet compress. So I have a little bit of a visual for you. You sit in a chair, just like I'm doing. You've got a Ziploc bag full of a really cold paper towel with some ice in it maybe, and hold it over the eyes and upper cheeks. The wet side is touching your face. Then you stand up, bend over, hold your breath, and the effect will occur. Arousal will decrease. Now, there's a third option for doing this. Splash cold water on your face. Splashing cold water on your eyes and cheeks may be sufficient. Now, bending over and holding your breath is really going to do the trick. However, holding your breath and splashing your face could be enough. So, here's some cautions. I hope you haven't tried the skill already because I have some warnings first. Heart problems. If you use cold water to induce the dive reflex, it can reduce your heart rate very rapidly. So individuals with any heart disorder, a heart rate below normal baseline, their normal baseline due to medications, other medical problems like anorexia nervosa or bulimia nervosa, should only use this procedure with permission from their medical providers. So if that sounds like you might want to check in with your doctor before you use the tip skill. Tip skills also have short-lived effects. The physical effects of the cold water are actually very short-lived. It's easy for the out-of-control emotion to return if you're not careful. Once extreme arousal is reduced from the tip skill, it can be important to practice a different set of skills appropriate for the problem at hand. So you might start with tip, and then you might go to wise mind accepts. You might distract through the strategies we talked about before. Okay, tipping the temperature, done. How about intense aerobic exercise? So the second tip skill is to engage in, as I mentioned, intense aerobic exercise of any kind for at least 20 minutes. So intense exercise can have a rapid effect on mood, decreasing negative mood and ruminative thoughts, and increasing positive affect after exercising. So a major characteristic of emotions is that they organize the body for action. Anger organizes the body to attack or defend. Fear organizes the body to run or flee, and so on and so forth. When the body is highly aroused, it can be difficult to inhibit emotional action, even if the action is dysfunctional. Intense exercise in these situations can re-regulate to a less emotional state. 20 to 30 minutes, that is. 3, paced breathing. This refers to slowing the pace of inhaling and exhaling to an average of about 5 to 6 breath cycles per minute, and breathing deeply from the abdomen. Breathing out should be slower than breathing in, and that's a key aspect. So think 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out. Generally, the heart beats faster during in-breaths and slows down during out-breaths. So this change in heart rate is influenced by, you guessed it, the sympathetic nervous system upon breathing in, and what do you think it could be? The parasympathetic nervous system in breathing out. So paced breathing itself causes change in nervous system activity. It blows my mind to say. In a way similar to the dive reflex, slowing breathing down to approximately 5 to 6 breaths per minute is effective in reducing emotional arousal by activating the parasympathetic nervous system. This one's so important to me that I want to try it with you right now. So if you can sit with your back as straight as possible, feet on the floor, try and breathe in to the count of 4, out to the count of 8. Might be difficult, and we might have health restrictions that inhibit us from putting our feet on the floor, sitting up straight, or breathing in or out for a certain amount of time. So this can be modified. Whatever modifications are required are going to be important because we want to reduce distress. We don't want to increase distress. So the key is that the out breath is longer than the in breath. Did you feel anything? Are you still trying it? Let's do it a little longer. I know I felt my heart rate go down a little bit. This is one of my favorite skills to use. So the fourth tip skill here is paired muscle relaxation. I wish we had time to do this together, and unfortunately we don't. So we pair muscle relaxation with breathing out. The strategy is to tense up certain muscle groups, noticing the sensation of tension while breathing in, and then relaxing, letting go of that tension when we breathe out. Noticing the tension gradually go down. Now the goal is to increase awareness of both tension and relaxation. Tensing and then relaxing muscle groups can cause your muscles to become actually more relaxed than they were at the beginning, and more relaxed than you are ordinarily. So let's take a look in summary at the tip skill. There we are, TIPP, tipping the temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, and paired muscle relaxation. We have wise mind accepts, and we have tip, both for crisis situations. We're going to talk about one more skill, and then we'll practice a long form skill, which is going to be exciting. And then we might see Dulcinea and Avatar again. So we're going to talk about self-soothing, being comforting, nurturing, peacemaking, gentle, mindfully kind to oneself. Self-soothing activates reduced vulnerability to emotion mind, which is when our emotions are in control, and impulsive behaviors, reducing the sense of deprivation that is the precursor to feelings of vulnerability sometimes. They help people tolerate pain and distress without making things worse. So I've got helpful reminders for the Wise Mind Accepts distraction skill, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system skills of TIP. So there's a way to remember self-soothing, and it's the 5 senses: vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Now, it's important to balance self-soothing with focusing and working on a task. It's especially important during crises when sudden demands feel overwhelming and keep one from doing what's required. In such a scenario, self-soothing can be an effective first step to bringing down negative emotions. However, self-soothing is not sufficient for resolving a crisis. It needs to be followed by working on the task and getting it done. Alternatively, you might try one of the TIP skills as a way to reduce feeling overwhelmed, followed by problem solving, and then followed by self-soothing as a reward. From experience, it has been a great way to get things done for me. So when it comes to really intense crises, I've developed something that I usually have folks do when they're in group with me, and I want to share it with you, so that you might be able to develop one of these yourself and practice this skill on your own in a jiff. So I call it the self-soothing kit. Everyone does this for homework when they are with me in group. Here's my kit. I've got it in a makeup bag, and it's ready for when I'm in a crisis. I know that I can go to this bag, and it's got self-soothing items ready for me. I don't have to think about anything. I didn't have to plan or prepare. The work is already done. So let's see what I've got in mind. It might give some ideas about engaging the 5 senses. Okay, well, I've got this Trident gum. It's cinnamon. It's a taste I really like. It's very soothing, maybe distracting as well. I've got some hand lotion. It's scented. So it feels great on my hands. I can focus on the sensation of touch. And also there's a smell to it. It's a smell that I really enjoy as well. Now, in this bag, I've got a Werther's hard candy. I love caramel, so sucking on it can be a great distraction. And again, it's a taste I love. A fidget spinner. Great for distraction as well. Fun to look at, fun to play with. A lovely stone. It's very smooth. You can get lost in the texture of it, all the different lines and the shimmer that it makes. It feels good on the skin too. It's kind of cool. So this is really helpful for a crisis. I've got this Goosebumps book. It's my favorite Goosebumps, The Haunted Mask. I grew up reading it a lot when I was a kid. And I've got some pictures in there that are really helpful for me. And I've got notes in the margins as well. This is my crisis survival version. So it's particular for a crisis event when I'm reading it. So those are the contents of my crisis survival kit. It would be really lovely if you all could make one and have it ready for yourself. It doesn't have to look like mine at all. It can look like you want it to look. Any types of sounds, tastes, smells, touches that really soothe you. It's about kindness. It's about gentleness. It's about being with yourself and giving yourself nurturing. That's what this skill is about. So, another option for self-soothing is a more focused attention on body sensations. It's called the body scan. Now, this is a practice commonly used in meditation. The idea is to settle the mind by letting go of thoughts about the past or about the future, and instead focus the mind on the present and on your present experience of your breath and your body. It's a way of approaching the sensations of your body with the curiosity of a child. Through this process, you will discover a lot about how your body feels, your sensations, and your mental reactions to paying attention to various parts of your body. Focusing your mind on your breath and on specific body sensations can be a very soothing experience if it's done slowly, with curiosity, and with gentleness. Okay? It doesn't require a lot of effort or even a lot of imagination. Bringing your mind back to the present and focusing on your body sensations can anchor the mind, calming emotions that feel out of control. It can be the buoy that you hold onto in the storm. Some people experience relaxation-induced panic because of unmet expectations. So the body scan might not result in relaxation. You might not have that aha, epiphany, nirvana moment. That's okay. The important part of the exercise is to learn awareness of the body, not to become a Buddha overnight. Now, this is something that I can't stress enough. If you're a person who experiences gender dysphoria or body dysmorphia, some regions of the body might be uncomfortable to rest your attention upon. If you notice an increase in distress, move your awareness to a part of your body that we've already focused on, or until we move somewhere else or somewhere more neutral for you, okay? You don't need to go to focusing on that region that feels uncomfortable, especially when you're in a crisis. Now, when you're not in a crisis, it might be an interesting exposure therapy. It's not what we're doing when our SUDs are 70 to 100. We're not trying to add dysphoria to the crisis. So, what I want to do with you here and now, in the time remaining, is a body scan. We're going to practice this skill. It's going to be a little longer than the other skills practice we've done. Feel free to stop at any time. Now, before we begin, I'd like you to check in with yourself. Rate where your SUDs are in this moment. You might ask, what's my level of distress? What might I rate that number as from 0 to 100? Okay. Now, as I mentioned, there's a particular position that I like to use for being mindful. If I'm sitting in a chair, I've got my feet flat on the floor. My back is up straight. It's kind of like there's a fishing wire pulling up at the top of my head. Okay? My body is awake. My body is aware. And my body is relaxed. So if you could join me with your feet flat on the floor, if you could join me with your back as straight up as possible, as if there's a fishing wire pulling up at the top of your head. If you can join me in being awake and aware and relaxed in your body, I'd be very grateful. We might rest our hands on our laps and gently close our eyes. bring your attention to your breath now. There's no need to change what's going on. You can follow the natural inflow and outflow of your breath. Throughout this practice, you might notice your attention goes somewhere else. Something you have to do tomorrow, something big that's going on in the world, a body sensation that feels uncomfortable. What I'd like you to do if that happens is gently redirect your attention to whatever part of the body we're talking about. I'll include some reminders throughout. I'd like you now to bring your attention to your eyes, relaxing the muscles around the eyes. There's no need to squint or have tension around the eye sockets. Letting go. Feeling maybe even a smile in the corner of the eyes, pulling the eyes upward. And we move down to the jaw. And if your jaw is clenched or your muscles tight, relax your jaw, let it hang. And we move down to the tongue. Try and relax the root of your tongue as far back as the muscle goes. Letting the tongue rest inside of the mouth. We move now to the throat, relaxing, feeling as if our throat with every in-breath is filling the neck, focusing on that image. We move down now to the heart. Relaxing the heart. Breathing into it. If you need to put your hand on your heart, I encourage that. We might feel a smile, as we did with our eyes, forming inside of our heart. This isn't to cover up the emotions that are there. This is to make room for the compassion that we're cultivating for ourselves in this practice. Breathe into the heart. Let's think about the shoulders. Bring your breath into the shoulders. I know I carry a lot of tension there, a lot of problems in my shoulders. Fill your shoulders with air. You might imagine the tension spots, the rough zones, the knots, the kinks. as solids, hard. And as we breathe, turning to liquid, melting into gas, and the gas floats away. We can fill that area with our breath now. Relaxing the shoulders. We might check in with the rest of the body. Did our eyes tense up a little bit? Or jaw clench? Have our hearts hardened? Go back, do a quick scan of what we've done already. Relax again if you need to. As we move down to the belly, just like with the heart, put your hand on your belly to feel that inflow and outflow of breath. There's no need to tighten up your core, to look a certain way. This is how our bodies exist in space right now. And if you've placed your hand on your heart or your belly, bring it back gently to your lap. We're moving into the hands now. As I mentioned before, if your attention continues to wander, your thoughts moving to the future or what I look like when I do this, gently guide your attention back to the hands. Focus on the sensations. You might ask yourself, what's going on between my palm and the top of my hand? Is there a tingling there? Vibration? Is there any pain? What are the sensations of my hand? We move to the pinkies. With curiosity about tingling, vibrations, and move to the ring and the middle and the index finger and the thumb. We gently bring our attention from our hands now to our pelvic region, our groin. Paying attention to any sensations, any movement, vibration. Breathing into the pelvis. And we move down into the thighs, observing the sensations as we slowly move down to our knees. And we guide our attention to our shins, our calves, inquiring about the vibrations, the tinglings, the pains within. As we continue lower into the ankles, and now the foot. Thinking about the place where the foot makes contact with the floor. What's going on between the bottom of the foot and the top of the foot? What can you observe? What do you notice going on there? We move to the big toe. And out to the index. Middle. This little piggy had none. And this little piggy went wee, wee, wee all the way home. I'd like you now to bring into your attention the entire sphere of awareness of your body. Your eyes, your jaw, your tongue, your throat, your heart, your shoulders, your belly, your hands, your pelvic region, thighs, knees, shins, calves, ankles, feet, toes. I'd like you to bring attention now and finally back to the breath, observing that natural inflow, natural outflow. When you're ready, gently bring yourself back into the space in which you are sitting or standing or whatever you're doing. Gently lifting your eyes and bringing with you whatever you found in practice. I'd like you to check in with yourself one last time, asking about where your suds are now. Did they change? What did you notice in that practice? What did you observe? Well, I can't hear you now, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much for engaging in that practice with me and for being with me on a very important night. I'm going to stop the recording of this now,